reading is one of the most fundamental parts of Yu-Gi-Oh! Because if you read a card, then you're able to then tell what it does and how you can play around it and counteract it. It seems quite simple, and it seems like a very sort of basic thing that most Yu-Gi-Oh! Players would get and understand. So for this video, I'm going to name some of the 10 cards that still today I have not read. So at number 10 we have METALFOES Counter. This is particularly odd considering how last year I managed to win a regional with METALFOES Zoo, and it was kind of strange because I played 3 copies of it, and I was always setting it, and I had it basically every turn. And, well, to tell you the truth, I didn't really use it correctly. In fact, I was activating it at the incorrect times, and that kind of goes to prove that you don't actually need to read your cards to do well at this game. So there you go. Number 9, I have TIMAEUS. So this card is quite popular in a lot of Dark Magician decks. Well, I don't really know why, because as far as I'm concerned, it's not good. But, well, I mean, then again, I wouldn't know that because I haven't read it. I think it does something like in the anime where it fusion summons, but that's about as far as my knowledge goes on it. For the most part, I can assume, well, I've never seen it in any Dark Magician list, therefore it's probably bad. So it's safe to say that I have TIMAEUS is probably not worth running and probably not a good card and I don't ever have to read it. So that's fine. At number 8, we have Rank Up Magic. Now you're probably wondering at this point, well, which Rank Up Magic do you mean? That's kind of the sort of conundrum I'm in. I don't actually know which one, but I know that there's like about 10 or something. There's S0 Turbo, which I've played that before in the past, and the way you summon S0 is by discarding a rank up card, so that kind of justified me not ever having to read it. It was, well, because I'm discarding it, so it's in the graveyard and I never have to deal with it again. That's about as far as my extensive knowledge of rank up cards go, was playing S0. I did, however, play Burning Abyss way back when it first came out, and Astro Force was quite popular in this card. Now I know what that one does, but in terms of like the other like 50 rank up cards, I have no idea. I know that they can special summon Raid Raptors, and I tried to play Raid Raptors on stream once, and it didn't really go well. Thankfully, FarfaYGO Pro kind of guides you and tells you what to do, because you just kind of like click activate whenever possible. So that was helpful. I know that it ranks up XE monsters and it summons more powerful XE monsters on top of that one, so that's kind of cool. It's probably good in some decks. Thankfully, not in any decks I plan on playing, probably for the rest of my entire life. Number 7, we have Dark Mirror Force. So there's quite a lot of battle traps, and recently with the addition of things like Storming, Drowning, and Quaking, well, I think that this kind of power creeps some of the older Mirror Forces, perhaps maybe not the OG Mirror Force, but definitely like something like Dark Mirror Force, and I think there's maybe a different Mirror Force as well, I'm not sure. To tell you the truth, I think Dark Mirror Force is probably bad, and that's only because I've never seen it in any deck list before in my life. I think it has something to do with Dark Monsters, but that's just a guess going off of the name. Would I ever play it? Well, I'd have to read it, obviously, but until then, I don't think I'm going to bother. At number 6, we have Lost World. It managed to lose me a game at my recent regionals. Most of my regionals I've at least gotten an invite, thankfully, but this season has been particularly tragic. So at the recent regional, I went 0 and 2 drop, and one of my losses was to dinosaurs, and they were playing this Lost World card. Now, as a Burning Abyss player, anything that goes on my side of the field is probably a bad idea unless it's a Burning Abyss monster. I know that Lost World summons a token to my field, so I guess that's kind of cheating because I suppose I know what it does, but then again, that's only because my opponent told me so. Did I bother to check? Did I bother to confirm this? No, I didn't. Lost World is a card that summons a token to your side of the field, and that's about as far as my knowledge goes, and that's all I really need to know as a Burning Abyss player. A Burning Abyss player who went 0-2 at a regional. At number 4, we have ASTROGRAPH Sorcerer. This is particularly strange, especially since Pendulum is the best deck, and as someone who's been playing Zephyr recently, well, that's probably not a good idea to avoid reading perhaps maybe the best card in the game currently. As some people have pointed out so kindly, it's fine if you draw it, and if you don't draw it, well, that's also fine. I know it's searchable, but that's only because I've read Electromite. It specials itself from the hand, and I think that's about it. In any Pendulum deck I've ever played, I've managed to avoid playing ASTROGRAPH, even though I think that it facilitates making Electromite, which I guess is good. But have I read it? No. Have you seen this card? It's an absolute essay. I'm not going to read a card that has that much text on it in the scale and as a monster effect. I'm sorry, that's just too much for me to deal with. I know it's level 7, so I've managed to make Absolute Dragon with it a few times, but in terms of actually using its effect, well, maybe I have used it a few times because DevPro told me to, not because I actually know what it does. Why have I bothered to avoid reading it? Well, because it's too long. So that's why I haven't played it in Zephyr. A lot of people ask me about their Zephyr list and stuff recently because I was like trying to build it and stuff. The truth is, you don't need to know what a card does if you don't play it. So that's kind of like my motto right now. And number 3, we have VENOMINAGA, Deity of Snakes or something like that. So this card is, I think, in contention for the longest card text in all of Yu-Gi-Oh! I think that kind of goes without saying and sort of explains why I've never read VENOMINAGA. For any of you who are doing a PhD or some kind of massive assignment at university, I can honestly recommend just copy-pasting this card text from the Yu-Gi-Oh! Wiki and putting it into the Word document, and you'll probably manage to make up about half of the word count. So I have no idea what this card does. I don't know what it's played in and how you summon it. I don't even know if it was in the anime. I would assume it's in the anime, and I can safely say it's terrible. The reason I know it's terrible is that pretty much any boss monster printed about 400 years ago, which is when this card was released, is generally terrible. They have horrible summoning requirements. They have very lackluster effects that lose to like something as simple as, I don't know, a trap hole probably. Can it be normal summon? Probably not, so I guess Trap Hole doesn't beat it. But the point is that VENOMINAGA is way too long to read. Now, judging by the name, it probably has something to do with reptiles, and I've seen a couple of cards that are good in reptiles, like Gigabyte and King of the Feral Imps and Masked Chameleon. Does VENOMINAGA have any synergy whatsoever with these cards? Maybe, maybe not. Well, I haven't read it, so I guess I couldn't tell you that. I'm not really the person you should be asking about VENOMINAGA, but what I do know is that, again, I would recommend that if you have some kind of word count to make up, put this card text into your essay and you will probably get an A. VENOMINAGA is just way too long. If I was to hazard a guess, I think that this card probably requires some kind of graveyard manipulation or requires some kind of reptile monster on the field, and then maybe like boost attack. Probably has something to do with the battle phase. I don't think it has a win condition because I probably would have heard of it by now if it had some kind of FTK ability. But other than that, yeah, it probably just boosts attack and like, I don't know, like adds a reptile to your hand from somewhere in the game. But yeah, VENOMINAGA, that's my number 3. And number 2, we have Pot of Greed. So very similar to the reasoning as VENOMINAGA. It's just way too long to read, and with any card that's way too long to read, again, I would simply recommend that you just skip over it completely and trust your opponent, because there's absolutely no way your opponent has no idea what it does anyway. Now, Pot of Greed has been banned, so that's even more reason for me not to read it, but I think it's something to do with adding cards to your hand. Now, I've seen it a few times in the anime, but they never really explain it. In fact, I think they've only explained it once. They absolutely never explain it every single episode and every single duel. Which is fine because nobody wants to have to deal with trying to understand what an entire dissertation says, so that's fine. Pot of Greed is banned, and I basically never have to read it again. Before we get to number 1, I would just like to quickly shout out my latest patrons, Maurice and Blake. Thank you for contributing over on Patreon. For any of you guys who are considering becoming a patron, you know, that's fine. If you don't become a patron, that's also fine. I probably would recommend you don't help out this channel because you end up with shit posting like this, so I'm really sorry about that. But, you know, in all seriousness, I do appreciate it. It means a lot. Thank you so much. And at number 1, we have SPYRAL Double Helix. All I know is that this summons Master Plan from the deck. Not because I've read it, but because all my opponents do this to me. So I kind of just have to go with what they say and trust them. Double Helix is a really good card, and I know that it made SPYRAL probably the best deck, maybe of all time, just because of how powerful this one single card is. It literally took SPYRAL from being this generic kind of gimmicky, like, sort of synchro spammy deck when it had like 3 Gofu or something. I don't know, it did stuff before Double Helix, but after Double Helix came out, well, SPYRAL did literally become the best deck of the format, and again, like I said, probably maybe even the best deck ever. Why have I never read it? Well, I kind of, like, just out of protest, don't want to read James Bond fanfiction. Nothing against people who are into fanfiction, but I'm not a big fan of James Bond, which is kind of weird coming from someone who lives in Britain, but you know, Double Helix, it's just way too long. Link monsters generally give me headaches, the arrows, it's way too much to deal with. I only recently just learned how to summon Firewall Dragon, so Double Helix is just an extra piece that I just don't want to have to deal with. And SPYRAL are probably not very good anymore, so that's fine. I guess that in itself is reason enough for me never to have to read it. As far as I'm concerned, the text has like 4 words, which is summon Master Plan from deck or something. That's really all it needs to do, and that's really all I care about. So this has been my top 10 cards I've never read. Again, I would just like to reiterate that you should not be taking this video as an example or how to conduct yourself in a duel. You should be reading your opponent's cards, and you should definitely be reading your cards before you make up effects and try to convince your opponent that that's what they do, because, well, I'm sure someone's done that to me at some point after I've asked what does that do, and I just take their word for it. So never take your opponent's word for it. They're probably cheating, probably playing VENOMINAGA in the deck, so you're going to have to play around that, and try think about that next time you go to university. Thanks everyone for watching. This has been my top 10 cards I've never read. Comment, like, and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.